Okay, it's 1 minute to, so I'm going to start letting everyone in.
I think you should, yes, yes.
Welcome everyone back to our daily 4 p.m. Zoom talks. We're very excited to be back at it, and we have a whole lot of new content to share with everyone, which relates to our upcoming North-South sale, which will be running from the 8th of November through to the 11th. So it's 4 days of auctions, and there's 3 catalogs. So
why is it so soft?
Sorry, I think there's people on. There's 3 catalogs. I hope everybody has had a look through all of them. If not, they are available on our website, and the hard copy should be being sent out shortly. So today we are joined with Wilhelm van Rensburg, who's going to be talking to us about the contemporary South African ceramics, and I think he has got a few guest speakers with us as well. So I think most people have joined. So Wilhelm, would you like to take over?
Yeah, okay, thanks, thanks Arisha, and very warm word of welcome to our special guests, and I will introduce them as they work here in the presentation. I do, however, want to start with these 2 quotes. And I really like the first one by Frida Harmser, the art historian Frida Harmser. She gives us a no nonsense definition of ceramic art. A pot is elevated to the realm of art if the potter makes it primarily for that reason, and it will then be judged as art and not as a well-designed household utensil. Really no nonsense definition. I also like Grayston Perry's take on ceramic art, and what he says is that what's brilliant about ceramics is the range of techniques and the enormously rich history which can be drawn on for inspiration. You have everything that a painter has, but also most of the stuff a sculptor has, and all those very particular techniques and effects that you can only get with ceramics. And I thought I'd look at what he refers to as that enormously rich history of ceramic art, and specifically of contemporary South African ceramic art. And I want to start by referring you to 3 publications. The first one on the left by Professor Nieland was published in 1963, Contemporary Pottery in South Africa. The one in the middle, 1966. You might be perplexed about that one, Treasures in the Castle of Good Hope, but you'll see in a moment why I've chosen that publication. And in 1973, Potters of Southern Africa. And that, I think, is the period when the whole concept, the whole idea of contemporary ceramic art actually emerged in South Africa. Now, let's start with Nieland. I think his use of contemporary is quite interesting, because he uses in terms of, he uses that term in terms of modernity, in terms of progress. And he refers to that, to the small scale artisanal potteries and refractories that sprung up in South Africa from the early 20th century. And you can see an image of the Transvaal pottery around about 1914, and he also discusses other potteries such as the Boksburg East potteries, responsible for Lucia ware, continental China, crescent potteries, grain potteries with Dros Day ware, hamburger potteries, Kalahari Studio, the National Ceramic Industries, and the Cullinan refractories responsible for producing linware mainly. And what is interesting about these small potteries and refractories was the fact that the works in the main were still thrown on the pot. They were not molded as such, and a lot of those works were decorated by a vast group of artists, as you can see in the image on the right. And these wares were, of course, immensely popular, especially in the 1930s, 40s, and 50s. because they lent themselves for these spectacular displays at agricultural shows all around the country. So at the top there, you have Kalahari Studio at the Goodwood Centre in Cape Town. You have Zalberg Pottery. This one was in Durban Agricultural Show, and Transvaal Potteries in Johannesburg. And the reason for that was with agricultural shows, that of course is associated with livestock, but of course flowers as well, dahlias and roses, were in competition. Those growers were in competition with each other, and of course these vases lent themselves for spectacular displays. So these potteries could hardly keep up with the demand, and their histories are well documented in catalogs, in exhibitions, such as these that you see here, the Women of Olifantsfontein, a detailed, exhaustive list of all the women artists coming from mainly the UK, settling in Olifantsfontein near Pretoria, and working on that. That was taken this was sort of late 1990s. That was extended by Wendy Gers, South African studio pottery. She later published in 2015, Scorched Earth. So it's well documented, this period of ceramic art in South Africa. And in 2018, we had Olifantsfontein's focusing very specifically on that pottery. And what is interesting of this book is the multiple ceramic tiles that adorned the post offices and banks throughout South Africa. And we have examples of the work on auction coming up now, such as the Transvaal pottery, these two commemorative mugs, if you like, from 1909, and the Union Day celebrations or commemoration mug there from the 1910. We also have this example that of the Transvaal potteries. I think this is a straightforward transfer that you see on that vessel, and then the highly sought after lately example of linware that you see in this particular example. Now I mentioned that Nieland not only looked at these small scale potteries, he also looks at factories such as this one. This is the Continental China factory outside Boksburg on the East Rand, leading to, of course, mass-produced dinnerware in factories such as these. And I thought it would be interesting to associate William Kentridge's 6 cappuccino cups of 2008, commissioned by the Ely company, because it's also a type of, I suppose, limited edition type of mass-produced project here. So you have almost full circle, you know, small potteries and refractories, massive, large-scale mass-produced wares, and then back to exclusive mass-produced wares such as these. Now that brings us to the other aspect and the other source of inspiration, if you like, of contemporary South African art, and that would be what I would call historically significant ceramics. And that, I think, is best captured by the book on the left, Treasures at the Castle of Good Hope, the William Fear collection, and ceramics also feature quite prominently in that. Of course, the book captures the furniture, the paintings, the silver, and sort of like unceremonial use of the word China to lump all of those porcelain pieces together, such as the large Van Moor rose vase that you see on the right-hand side. So typically associated with historically significant ceramics would be VOC plates, as you can see on the left, and then ordinary dinnerware for everyday use on the right. And if you're interested in in buying a pair of those Van Moor rose vases, we do have a pair on auction. They are actually huge, over 1/2 meter tall. So really quite spectacular, quite dramatic work. I think the other aspect of historically significant ceramics, you would find in what is known as heritage vessels. And here you look at a huge collection dug up at Mapungubwe. Now, I think we all know about the gold rhinoceros at Mapungubwe, but I think not many people know of this collection. That you see here. Mapungubwe, of course, going back 1,000 years, it was the confluence of trade routes in the global south, sub-Saharan Africa, Zanzibar, the Arab world, and as far as India, all came together at Mapungubwe. And this was also what they traded. And I think, and I'm sure you would agree, quite interesting forms. And I'm just showing you a couple of examples here, quite sophisticated forms, I think. And when you look at these examples, I think it's also interesting to look at the different materials. Now, why do I show you all of this? Because contemporary South African ceramicists also draw on this tradition of the heritage earthenware, such as Nestanala, that you see here. This is a particularly big example of hers. Her work tended to be quite small, but this one is quite tall, quite an interesting example. And then, of course, the inimitable Ian Gareth with this particular vessel. And I think, you know, of course, the innovation of the technique, I think, is important here for me, as well as the surface decoration. I almost want to call Ian sort of the African Lalique. Those of you who know Lalique glass would know what I'm talking about. But his latest work looks something like this, which I find quite amazing. This is certainly one of my favorite examples on the sale. Moon Apples, he calls this particular one. And I think the form might still reference that earthenware heritage vessel, but the decoration, I think, is quite contemporary. And in a manner, it reminds me of Maria Martinez's work. She, of course, is a living heritage artist in the state, and you may see what I'm on about here. Simon Masilu, I would also put in this category an extension of that heritage vessel. In this case, a coffee pot with perhaps some Islamic influence here. He was part of the Kotlehong art workshop on the East Rand, but I think quite a magnificent piece. Also, heritage vessels, you can classify the Rorke's Drift stuff. Rorke's Drift, that missionary station, or the workshops there, the artisanal workshops there, started in 1962 with Swedish missionaries. And here you have examples of that. The ceramic department was the steps a child of Rorke's Drift. I think the favorite child was, of course, the weaving. The weaving did very well, and they cross-subsidized different art departments, such as the ceramic one, as well as later on in 1968, the painting department. But interesting here, the use of local clays, as you can see here, and a very interesting use of decoration that might be sort of like a cowl, if you like. And we also, what is quite interesting, we know the names of some of these ceramic artists, such as Lefina Molefe, as you can see on the left. The other part, apart from those heritage vessels excavated at Mapungubwe in the 1930s, they also excavated these wonderful animals. And that is another one, you know, not only the domestic utensils, those pots, but also these playful creatures. And that, I think, brings us to somebody like Hilton Nell, who I think works in that same tradition, obviously with a modern slant in these delightful cats of his, quite famous cats of his. He might as well also, I think, drew on the famous Staffordshire cats and dogs produced in the 19th century. But these ones, I think, are quite quirky. The one on the left is called Deep Contemplation, and the one, the cat on the right, is called Flower Cat. This is a glimpse of his studio, absolutely enchanting, and you can see some ceramic cats in the making here. And we also are very fortunate to have a student of his, Nico Massemola, with these two these two delightful hairs in here. And that brings us to Anne Marais, and she is I think, Anne, if you don't mind, and Anne is joining us to talk a little bit about this one. I think it is called The Last Supper. So what can you tell us about this particular work of yours?
Oh, good afternoon, everyone. This work is an example of a new expression I started in 2017. It's been a long time coming, and it's been in my mind for many decades. And finally, in 2017, I decided that I needed to make a huge sea change in my work, in my expression, because of my deep concern that I have for the environment and specifically animals. Now, I'm not going to talk about what's going on. We all know about forests being cut down and animals being displaced in all kinds of ways. But in this work, I used The Last Supper, Leonardo da Vinci's fresco in Milan as a metaphor for this. So it comes from the Christian ideology, in as much as Leonardo da Vinci's work had 13 figures. This has 13 figures as well. And the crux of it is that Christ died for the sins of man. And in our Anthropocene era, all other species are dying for the sins of mankind. These animals, a lot of them are imaginary. They represent all animals. And what I'm trying to say is to bring to our consciousness other animals, because we tend to, especially in urban environments, we don't take much notice of them, and we do that neglect at our peril, because without them we won't survive either. So what I'm trying to do is to portray the essence of an animal and the sentience of other animals, because they have as much sentience as human beings. And so this is what I'm trying to do with my work. I have other installations and artworks going forward, and I expect to be doing it for quite a long time. So that's in a nutshell what it's about.
So which one is Judas?
The baboon, the monkey. He's not care about anything. He's eating. The rest are not eating. They're
this one.
Yes.
Fascinating, absolutely fascinating. I really like it. And then go, I'll call back on you a little later as well. Okay. Right. So that brings us to that 1973 publication. And I think here it is from that pottery, small-scale pottery factory to the individual studio. Fascinating book here by Clark and Wagner, and they of course work on the tradition of the studio pottery of the 1930s, 40s and 50s in the UK. And what you're looking at is a sort of the front and back of a book published on the Victoria and Albert collection of studio pottery, and at the bottom I just put the names of the ceramic artists here. Hans Koper, I think, is fairly well known. Lucy P, I think is absolutely phenomenal. Michael Cardew would play a big role in many of the South African ceramicists of this era. This is, of course, my favorite exhibit in the whole of the Victoria and Albert. Up the stairs to your left, vast exhibition space with all these wonderful, wonderful works. So next time you are in London, please call. So the ceramic artists listed there is C.S. Bosch, as you can see here, and this is the work that we have on offer here. He, of course, studied under Michael Cardew, and fascinating work. Also, quite a tall jar that you see here. Here's another work by C.S. Bosch, and this is what I want to call, you know, the ceramic work becoming a canvas. So it is a tile of sorts. It's quite a large scale, but he paints on it with the glazes and the lights. Now, probably one of my favorite ceramicists on the sale is Michael Goddard Jacobs, and this is the work that we have of. He's quite an intriguing work. The soldier's pot and a lid here. I think it's quite quirky. I think it is minimalist. I think there's a sense of movement in this particular work. Charles studied in the US. He was influenced by the avant-garde ceramicists of the 1960s there. So in my mind, quite a special work, this one. Peter Hayes, he started the Tababusiku workshop in Lesotho, and this is an example of that. And I think what you're looking at, the wonderful decorations of the warriors and their shields here, of course, referencing the Anglo-Zulu wars of the early 19th century. Peter studied at St. Martin's School in London, and of course he was, was quite familiar with the ceramic artists of his day. Not that well known, Mariki van der Merwe, and here are some three exquisite works we have of hers. She studied at Berkeley in California, later moved on to the Art Institute of Chicago, and then came back to South Africa and she taught at Rorke's Drift. So these are lovely works that we have of hers on the sale. Anneke van der Walt, that you see here, and these are absolutely fascinating work. You know, it is almost as if she's taking a slab of clay and then just molded it. So it is the action. There's no attempt to make a final vase or pot or urn or jug or whatever. It is the action, I think, that she wants to capture here. And her work, and these are from the early 1970s, by the way, her work reminds me of a contemporary artist, Gabriel Orozco. And look at what he's doing. The working with the clay is a performance. My hands are my heart, and there he is actually performing the artwork, and you are left with a final ceramic art piece on the rack. So and look at the date, 1991. So Anneke van der Walt, 20 years ahead of her time. Another example of Anneke van der Walt on the left here, it reminds me very much of Constantine Brancusi's famous The Kiss that you see there. Andrew Walford, an example of his. He also studied Michael Cardew, Bernard Leach, and this is again one of those ceramic canvases, if you like, wonderful large-scale tile here. Tim Morris, also born in the UK, studied there, is influenced especially by Bernard Leach, and this you can see evidence of that in this tall vase with a bamboo decoration on this particular one. Jaime Rabinovich, also influenced by Bernard Leach, and you have a wonderful austere vessel here. Now, the 70s also saw quite quick and rapid professionalization of ceramic art in South Africa, of contemporary ceramic art, and that you see with the establishment of associations such as in 1972, Ceramic South Africa, with the aim of cultivating and foster interest in ceramics in the general public. And they have all sorts of activities, a very active organization. And under their auspices, the Cora Brick collection started in 1977. That is now housed at the Pretoria Art Museum. And some 2 weeks ago, we looked at the Pretoria Art Museum in our Museum Moments talks. And we also showed a number of examples from the Cora Brick collection. Professionalization also included a number of exhibitions, such as this one at the Johannesburg Art Gallery, at the National Art Museum Art Gallery in Cape Town in 1995. And this, by the way, is a very early Hilton Nell piece on the left, and another exhibition at UNISA 1988, Clay Plus, and I'm intrigued by the use of the triangle there, you know, so it's almost suggesting or symbolizing a relationship between earth and fire and potter, and what you can do with clay and the like. So quite nice. Professionalization, I think, also encompasses studies, academic studies. Here you have an example of Stockenstrom looking at the collection at the William Humphreys Art Gallery in Kimberley, and also Justin Kerrode documenting more than 5,500, I can't remember, but South African ceramics, their marks, monographs, and signatures. So quite quickly professionalized. And I think the upshot of this is that there was a move away from the use of craft art to contemporary ceramics. Still a standard work written by Wilma Cruz. And what I like about this is that she gives us heuristic tools to think of contemporary ceramic art in a different way, in a coherent way, and look at some of the sections that she addresses in her book: the vessel, the Anglo-Oriental tradition, which we looked at, the teapot, the creative table, fire sculpture, figures in clay, the tradition of the rural potter, the painter's pottery, that canvas that I mentioned a couple of times now, the plate as canvas, ceramics in the environment, large-scale works, and so on. And that brings us to sort of like a ceramic sculptor, Eugene Hön. I don't know, is he here? I hope he is.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. I'm not going to ask you when this photograph was taken.
1987.
Okay.
86.
Let's look at your works. Let's look at your work. Talk to me about these ones.
So lot 465 is Womb with a View. It was made for a night competition, a night exhibition curated by Suzette Munich at the market. It's press molded, and then decorated in ceramic Amaco colors. And it has a political theme, which is a follow-on work from a ceramic installation I did at Mark Theatre, adjoining exhibition, photographic exhibition. Mine was upstairs, and it was a one-person show with about 36 pieces on the exhibition, consisted of some drawings and work, and this is a following on work, sort of political satire. You can see sort of colors of the ANC on it, and yes, that's as much as I can say. The one on the right was made for a Style Design magazine's light competition, and as a whale theme, also press molded and decorated with Amaco underglazed colors, and then glazed with luster as a third firing.
Okay.
We very postmodern works. They're very postmodern, figurative, decorative, celebrating decoration. You know, before, when I was at Michaelis as a fine art student, we weren't allowed to decorate things. You had to use very monochromatic colors, so it was quite a liberation to kind of explore decoration while I was at the Technicon with Suzette Munich and being exposed to utilitarian ceramics and design in ceramics. So that's it.
Yeah, they're fascinating stuff, and I promise you both lights are working. We tested them.
Yes.
And the lusterware, look at that bit of lusterware there at the top of the crown, which is quite fascinating. But now we're also fortunate to have this drawing as a sort of like a working drawing, and you mentioned political satire, and we have this wonderful drawing of yours also on sale.
Do you want me to talk? This was a series of drawings that I did at the Cité as a residency for sabbatical leave, and it deals with bullying. It's the Minotaur series, and the titles of the various bulls are Jaws of Death, Big Shot, Big Noise, and it deals with aspects of bullying in our society, and a set of these were made into ceramic sculptures, a centerpiece for the mayoral auction dinner. It had a neon light combination as part of the installation. And what they did for the dinner was to auction off, gave each artist 3,200, I think it was, and then we had to make a centerpiece. And then when people bought the seats to the dinner, they also got the centerpiece, which was
okay. Yeah, this is certainly one of my favorite drawings on the whole sale. Then you have these wonderful, I think they're called spiritual vessels, and just look at that wonderful acorn there.
So these were made as an extension of a one-person show I had at the Santon Civic Art Gallery in 1996, dealing with myths and narratives on the origin of murder. I investigated myths and narratives associated with the origin of murder, and there was a series of sculptures made, and these were vessels where the expressive forms and shapes were, first the vessel was painted black, and then it was incised through. The inside of these vessels, by the way, are red, like an orangey color, and it's reminiscent of a fire burning in a tin, and it's hot in the inside and cold on the outside. And one of the pieces related to this piece, to these vessels, are in the Joburg Art Gallery, and it's "The Spirit of a Woodlit Nation Flows Away with Its Blood" is its title. So these are sort of vessels based on the sculptures that are made. Yeah. Narratives from Ben Ockery's book, My Famished Road, and Credo Mutlu's book, Indaba, My Children.
Fascinating, fascinating. And by the way, you're not looking at front and back, you're looking at two vases in this particular lot. And these ones.
So these two works were based on my passion for Russian constructivist works. Chris Smart made the plates, they were press molded, and then I decorated them or painted them. They're like paintings, and incised them, scratched through, and used lusters. And it was part of an exhibition at Casura Fine Art with Tina van der Walt, where she also did plates and bowls and so on. And it was an extension of a mural that I did at the TWR campus as part of the library, looking at Russian constructivist posters and the plates, of course. So they look at political satire as an extension of my exhibition also at the Market Theatre.
Yeah. So if you look at the headscarf here, and if you look at the factory there with the serrated roof and the open wide screaming mouth, I think this is what you're talking about, you know? Yes. So these are examples.
And also Russian constructivist plates, if you go and look at them.
Yeah, that's it. So this was a poster celebrating Women's Day, 1920. Look at the headscarf here, the factory there in the background, and then this wide open screaming mouth. Okay, yeah, great, Eugene. Okay, so at the same time that Eugene was making his sculptural ceramics, you also have the Artmore phenomenon, started by Faye Bering in the Champagne Valley in KwaZulu-Natal, with Bonnie and Charlie Bonakele, known as Bonnie and Charlie. These are some of her works, and some 30 years later, a second book appeared on their work, and we are very fortunate to have this wonderful example by Bonnie, an elephant hugging a stork, quite simplified forms, and of course clearly mythological in nature, the myths and legends of the surroundings. But we're also fortunate to have some of the screen prints made by Bonnie and Charlie that served as inspiration for her sculptural works, such as this was, of all the intertwined animals. These were, and I'm just showing you one example, we have quite a number of them on the sale, but they were printed at the Caversham Press by Christian and by Malcolm and Ross Christian. This a later work from the early 2000s. Here we have Stisu Zinele also working at the Artmore, bird with a snake in his beak. Quite a commanding work. The late 1980s and the early 1990s also, served as inspiration in different ways to ceramic artists, such as this tall vase by Hilton, clearly referencing the first democratic election here. This vase is called Democracy, and on the flip side you have 2004, so celebrating 10 years of democracy. Also of a political nature, this work, this intriguing work by Anne again, and you're going to tell us more about this work. I think it's called Never Again.
Yes, it was inspired by Nelson Mandela in his famous speech, never, never, never again will South Africa go through what we went through in apartheid. And I was quite an angry person. I made this in 2004 at what had gone on. And I decided that the Brett Kebble, where this was exhibited, would be a good public forum to air what had previously been private in John Foster Square on the 10th floor, where detainees were interrogated and met their death through the open window there. It's a small installation because it was a small event hidden away high up in the police building. But I also chose perspex walls because you cannot hide these kind of deeds. They will always come into the public domain eventually. And this was particularly inspired by Ahmed Timol, who supposedly jumped out the window. And when I looked at this again, I thought the tension is as palpable today as it was when I made it. And I think it's a good reminder. It's something that we should never forget. And that's why I think it will live on, this piece, as an historical document of what happened, and a reminder that we must never forget what went on, and it must never happen again. I also think that it shows how far we've come in a human rights culture presently. We do have problems here, but this kind of thing never happens, and it would never be allowed to happen now. So it's a cause for celebration, I think, in that way. So it's going backwards and forwards, and it's a measure of where we've been and where we are going and where we are now. That's just basically what it's about.
Yeah, absolutely fascinating. I think an absolutely seminal work for the time, and truly a remarkable work. Thanks, Anne. Not only politics, but also feminism, as you can see in these two examples by Susan Annandale. Clearly, the work on the right, the Y there. The Y is the second unknown. You know, you have X and Y. The second unknown, it is part of the chromosomes, you know, so it determines your sex, and this is now before any gender construction. So the slit there, and the one on the left, I think, look at how the rim actually collapses on itself, and in a manner, you know, in a feminist theoretical framework, I think you may want to describe these as vulva. Okay, so quite, I think, a powerful feminist statement here. Another feminist statement here, and I'm talking, you know, the art of the early democracy in South Africa here. A work by Noira Mabasa, and she started off working in clay, and only later on went on to carving in wood. And she challenged a lot of the patriarchal beliefs of her time. In the 1960s, she, for example, was the first Black woman to get a divorce from her husband. She was the first woman in Venda to have her own household. And typical figures such as this, she made these to serve as sentinels around her compound. If you like, so a fierce feminist, an early feminist, and a fantastic work that we have here, and of course other seminal exhibitions of the time, adding to the increasing professionalization of ceramics of contemporary ceramics in South Africa. You find in an exhibition such as this. This was also at the Pretoria Art Museum, and I'm only looking at the ceramic sculpture of Deborah Bell here that you see here. She later, and what I also like about this exhibition was the inclusion of preparatory drawings and sketches, such as the one we've seen with Eugene earlier on. She, of course, moved then from working in ceramic in clay to bronze, as you can see in these sentinels, and a wonderful example where you also get the painterly nature of her work, very iconic images that she uses in a lot of her, especially earlier stuff. And she also worked on these plates. I'm sure that is a very characteristic portrait that she would do. And these plates form part of the studio of Retief van Wyk. Retief van Wyk worked extensively with Robert Hodgins. I'm just showing you one example. This is called a colorful character. And certainly Robert was a colorful character. But I want to ask Retief van Wyk, who published this book on the ceramic art of Robert Hodgins, just to talk a little bit about what happened there when he worked with Robert.
Hi everybody. Yeah, I had the pleasure of creating Robert's ceramic surfaces for him for 18 years. It was almost like stretching his canvases for him. He painted on them with much ease and pleasure. It was a natural extension of his oeuvre. The medium was dry often, it was wet sometimes, and it was overglazed. So it was a welcome addition to his extension of his etchings or canvas surfaces. The clay was malleable, it was unpredictable, and Robert loved that. It was exciting for him because he would whisk up images and destroy them easily with sandpaper on the clay. His usual figurative suspects were all there: the mad kings, the maidens, the generals, but I dare say these ceramic ones are more intimate, they're more endearing. They have a certain vulnerability to them because maybe they're on a plate, a circular format, which is usually there to serve food on. And Robert, as we all know, he grew up pretty poor, and a plate was something quite valuable to him. So he saw the plate as a valuable thing. But if I may quote somebody, I'm going to say who it was: if the square symbolizes an institution, then the circle, as it does in Japanese and Native American crest, implies a self or a family. So I would say these images on the plates are from Robert's family. They're more about us than about the others, about the generals or the Nazi people. So on the auction, there are some beautiful prime examples of Robert's work. For instance, this lot in front of you there. These works of his were not produced in isolation. They were a collaboration. They were a friendship that we shared. Would you like me to say more?
Yeah. Okay. That's absolutely fascinating, Retief. Thanks for sharing that. And just a couple. I will whisk through these. Another big exhibition, Down to Earth, and then these ceramic artists would become household names. Ian Garrett, that you can see there, Barbara Jackson. Look at those quirky forms and the wonderful use of bright colors. And we're fortunate to have this example on the sale. Nesta Nala, we've seen her work, Lotte Nell, and then contemporary South African ceramic artists would go international, such as on this exhibition at the Museum of Art and Design, Columbus Circle in New York, called the Global Africa Project, and Nesta Nala was the darling on that particular exhibition there. Another international exhibition, this time in Berlin, in Bilbao, at the Guggenheim, and also the Museum of Contemporary Art in Barcelona, Making Africa, or Working Africa, a continent of contemporary design. And who would be represented there but Lucinda Mudge with her ways, and we are very fortunate to have an example of her work here. I think perhaps referencing Art Deco ceramics here, commenting on beauty, on Black beauty perhaps, but very complex and also satirical works there. Apart from these European large-scale exhibitions at prominent museums, We also see the Taiwan Ceramics Biennale, curated by Wendy Gears. All the big biennales would, as a matter of course, include large-scale ceramic works. I was fortunate enough to see this Yi Su Jung at the 57th Venice Biennale in 2017. In 2019, it was Edmund de Waal with his Library of Exiles. And we've just learned that Simone Lee would be representing the USA on the 59th Venice Biennale in 2020. Look at those absolutely gigantic ceramic pieces there. I'm sure it's going to be quite magnificent. Speaking of Edmund de Waal, if you've missed it at the Venice Biennale, it's at the moment at the British Museum. And he, of course, published his recent publication is The White Road, drawing on the Silk Roads, you know, those ancient trade routes between East and West. And he's looking at the porcelain routes here, right? Hence the title, The White Road. And he visits all these places that are listed at the bottom, the Dingzhenhen in China, Venice, where he looked at the single piece of porcelain that Marco Polo brought back from China in the 12th century. It is in the Basilica on St. Mark's Square. Versailles, Dublin, Dresden, the Appalachian Mountains of South Carolina, obviously where porcelain is mined, and the hills of Cornwall. And that brings us to very delicate porcelain pieces such as Juliet Armstrong's here, and also a number of works by Katherine Glenday. We have three pieces on the sale, and Katherine, if you could talk to us about these. Now, just when you read The White Road, what is fascinating to me is the manner in which Ekman describes making or working with porcelain, because he says as you pull up the pot, it's almost as if the pot exhales something. It's almost as if it begins to speak. Now, when you work in porcelain, what is it like?
I suppose not of what I work, the way I work is not always on the wheel, so I'm not always pulling up and exhaling. In fact, I long to be on the wheel. And those of us who work on the wheel know it's an incredibly time-consuming thing to do. So all three of the, actually no, the one, so that's a mold, that first blue swimmer is made in a mold, so a slip cast piece. You mentioned Marieke van der Merwe, and I think Eugene, you were talking about rebelling against the sort of the strictures of the postmodern kind of way of looking at art. And I also escaped from the University of Natal and in the fine arts department, and was extremely reactionary and made as much use of color as I could. Chaim Rabinowitz and those guys were sort of anathema in the 80s. They were brown. And so that first piece of mine is a slip cast piece. And I think, and I was in a very sort of reactive mode, doing everything that was absolutely not allowed in the fine arts world, illustrative, talking about dreaming. In fact, it's interesting because all three of these lots are about swimming or about the sea. So that was sort of more of my early voice of exploration, and also exploring the freedom of using color and being illustrative when it was kind of frowned upon. Yeah. And then the throne, those are thrown.
Okay.
And they and I started with trying to remember how I did it. I started with a wall of plain porcelain, and as I progressed, I mixed more and more brown clay, in each ball to sort of get this movement from light to dark. And yes, that was a thrown piece, and you can see by the sort of uneven rims that because of the sort of mixture of different sorts of clay, I think even the plain white ones maybe had more feldspar in them towards the top of the vessel, or I'd put clay, ordinary porcelain on the bottom, and then as I went along, put sort of a slightly more translucent clay body with that, and so that as it swirled, it kind of got lighter to the top. And those sort of swimming figures also, I think I probably put cut out pieces of paper into them, or I waxed them out to get that sort of more translucent area of the swimmer.
Are you talking about this one?
No. So that's the slip cast piece. I think, yeah, that's the slip cast. That's the earliest piece on the. That's 25 years ago. My maths is right.
Yeah, magnificent work. Yeah.
And then the next one is the throne work. Those series of 10 vessels, and that was called the Against the Tide of Darkness. And I was mixing clay as I kind of went along. That was made on the wheel 17 years ago.
Yeah.
Then,
fascinating. Absolutely fascinating.
And then the third piece is, you haven't shown that one yet, is All Swimming Free. Yeah, that one.
Yeah, that one. Yeah.
And also a slip cast piece, sort of more like my current work, sort of slip cast, but with elements of brown clay in the wall and sort of coming through. And then, you know, I don't really do figurative work anymore at all, but yeah.
Yeah. Okay. It's certainly very interesting in the way you explore the medium here. And today, I keep on using the word ceramic artist, but nowadays I think people working in clay can basically just be called contemporary artists. You know, such as this unbelievable piece d'resistance that we have here by John Newdigate and Ian Garrett. You need to tell us everything about this, John, please.
Hi, thanks, Wilhelm. Yeah, I think that I really just am very interested in the present time frame, and also what's present in front of me, which is really my garden and plants and animals, birds and insects. And I use them to depict human interactions. And so this one is called Birds Feeding. And I've noticed watching the birds in my garden that when something is fruiting and there's an abundance, the birds actually spend more time fighting with each other than actually eating. And usually there will emerge, a top bird will emerge and will get the lion's share of it. And then it will then use that food. You can't see, but on the other side of the pot, there's a depiction of one bird force feeding another bird, and as a way of sort of asserting dominance. So I do see nature as a very exuberant and abundant, thing to depict. But yeah, I just I'm not quite sure. Wait, I'm a bit lost here. I can't actually see what's going on. Yeah. So yeah, the birds aren't cute birds. They've got sort of long pointy beaks and beady eyes, and so I don't want them to be sentimental or cute, because actually birds are sort of feathered dinosaurs. So they're quite scary birds. I mean, I love birds, but I don't really like them to be too close to me. I have a strange relationship with them. I mean, I once had a parrot somebody put a parrot on my shoulder, and I really didn't enjoy that. So yeah, this piece is really about just depicting human interaction and really lack of cooperation, maybe jealousy and competitiveness, which is really, animals do as well. So yeah, it's animals and humans are really quite similar. It's using a technique that I use a technique that I've developed. It was interesting, that quote that you put on by Grayson Perry, where he said that ceramics offers all sorts of opportunities and techniques that aren't available to painters. And I've developed a system of using wax to reserve out layers, which enables me to create the sense of depth that that people see in my work. So it's a unique technique that I've developed myself.
Yeah, fascinating.
Yeah.
I love the red there at the bottom. I think that really,
and also the complexity of the composition and the layering and the foreground and the middle ground and the background. It's quite superb. I mean,
thank you so much, Eugene.
Yeah,
extraordinary.
Yeah, and also keep in mind that this is really a tall vase. It's nearly 60 centimeters. You can't get a sense of scale here, but it is quite a commanding, quite an imposing work. I think
it's very difficult to assess ceramics or any 3D object from a 2D image like this. And another interesting part is that I like them to tell a bit of a story. So as you move around the vessel, it's sort of like a single frame animation in a way. There's the aspect of time, because you can never see the whole thing at once, as opposed to a plate, which is more like a flat painting. But when it's a pot, you know, you always you wonder what's around the corner. So I like to surprise people with something, you know, other than what they've seen initially.
Yeah, no, great, absolutely fascinating. Absolutely, I think this will really do very well on the auction. A very new kid on the block, Andile Yalvane. He was also included in that Working Africa, that show in Germany and Bilbao and Spain, and the rest of Spain. So something else completely different, you know, sort of a contemporary twist of perhaps a traditional form here. Martine Jackson, I don't know whether she has joined us. She might be in the audience, but here you can see, you know, the ceramics. It's a far cry of that contemporary ceramics, a far cry of the idea of a vessel or a plate. It is more sculptural. So these ones are called Liminal Dance 1 and Liminal Dance 2. Quite fascinating works here. Ron Hoffman, and I think this one should also do well, because when you look at what is inscribed there, the year it all changed, and certainly 2020 is the year it all changed. So magnificent work. We have many other of Ron's plates on the sale as well. Carolyn unfortunately couldn't join us, but something architectural in this particular teapot here. And I think I want to end with a couple of installation shots. What do you do with your ceramics? And I think it was Annabelle Freiberg, a one-time editor of World of Interiors, who said ceramics are the vitamins in a room. And this is what you're looking at, you know, the vitamins in a room. And here you have another view. And just look at the manner in which Andile's vessel actually from there to here, and how well it fits in with contemporary works of art, Jack Heath there, and Olaf Bischoff over there. And then very lastly, what we also did was we produced a dedicated electronic catalog, putting all the ceramics in one catalog, and I put the link at the top so you can easily access that. Okay, that is basically my story. If there are any questions, you are most welcome to ask. Any comments, any questions, please feel free to unmute yourself, and I will try my best to answer. Or if you want to address a question to one of the panelists, you are most welcome to do that.
There is also the chat function if you want to write your message in the chat box.
Okay. Right.
Okay, well,
so I'm always sort of embarrassed by these silences, so I have a patchwork quilt of interesting stuff about ceramics. Bruce Chatwin. I think literary theorists think that this is his best work. He deals with a porcelain restorer. I think we've all read the songlines, Bruce Chatwin's Travelogue to Deep Australia, but do yourself a favor and read this one. Quite interesting. Another bit, the different collections of ceramic arts in South Africa. We've learned of the color brick at Pretoria Art Museum. We've learned at the collection of ceramics at the Wilhelm Humphreys. There's also a vast collection of ceramic arts at the Tatham in Pietermaritzburg, but this particular one is at the University of Pretoria, drawing mainly on the Van Tilburg collection. You're looking at the cover of the catalogue there. Another, well, installation shot. If you have linware, this is what you can do with it. Oh yeah, very famous, the Leyland commission work. He asked, he was a shipping magnate, and he asked James Whistler to design a dining room for him for his London townhouse to house his Oriental collection. And he was very pleased with what he did until Whistler had the temerity to paint these golden peacocks again on his green leather-clad walls, and that was the end of the friendship. But fortunately, the Smithsonian in Washington bought the whole thing, the whole room, and it is now on view at the Shackler Gallery of Eastern and Middle Eastern art on the mall in Washington. Annabelle Freiberg, I mentioned her before. She gives us a couple of interesting interiors, so you can have great fun with your ceramics. Look how well your brownware will go with your Francis Bacon's. And locally, lovely publication by Jewellery and Pierre Rabe of South African art. And this is really all I have to say. Okay, there you are.
Thank you very much. Thank you
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Wilhelm. Gene, hi.
You're most welcome, and thanks for joining.
Thanks, Wilhelm.
The ceramicists.
Thank you very much. Thanks,
Bye.
Philip. Bye.
Thank you very much.
You're most
Bye.
welcome. You're most welcome. Okay.
Thanks, Wilhelm. That was brilliant.
You're most welcome.
Thank you very much. Very interesting. Thank you for including us. It's wonderful. Bye.
Yeah. Thank you, Wilhelm, and everyone that co-presented with you. Most interesting.
Thanks, Frank.
Okay, I think I'll end the meeting here. This has been recorded, so it will be up on YouTube in a few hours. But again, Wilhelm, that was just so interesting, and it's so exciting to have this ceramic session. So thank you very much for sharing all that knowledge, and to the guest speakers as well. It's wonderful to be handling your artwork on our auction.
Most welcome. Thank you. Bye.
Retief, bye. Thanks.
Okay, I'll end off here. Thank you.